have dreams or dream practices proven to be valuable? And I'm just going to quickly drop that. I have to say that the dream poet always provides me with a absolute plethora of things to contemplate, and yet uh, it's like it's a lot of, there's so many different types of dreams. It's years of doing the dream work has, you can lean into this as deeply as you want to go. And I'm not going to steal the show with this one because I really want to hear what the guests have got to say on this. So, Michael, would you be kind enough to start this discussion off?
I know you're kicked off with Nathan.
You're thinking very loudly, Michael.
Sorry, I switch up the order as I move through the event. So.
The chess master. It's sooner or later we'll get back to this interview, and it's a very interesting topic because obviously just prior to this interview, I had really deep dreams. I have been lucid dreaming now, which has had a couple of really good ones this year, where I'm awake and I'm going, oh my God, my hands are here. Hang on, I'm here. Hang on, the illusions around me. So I'm awake in the astral planes, and this is a very good development. Dreams, if you can get your practitioners to actually engage deeper in the astral plane, there's obviously many different teachings of the great masters and that around the world about actually moving through the astral. However, we practice it obviously with empathy, communicating with animals and plants and things like this. However, pets can come back into your dream and save you from situations, that they empath, cats and dogs and birds and many of the different creatures around the place. Plus, they're quite symbolic. There's a beauty about the astral and the dreams about reading symbology because the astral and the soul tends to talk to one in more of these metaphorical or these universal language of symbols. Hence why, I think you should study a lot more runes and things. I find it's a very good to journal. If you can't write, obviously waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning scraping around for a pen is not the smartest thing. Look at some sort of way of recording. I've recorded many over the years, and I also like to hear it from students because some student will just ring you up in the middle of nowhere at any incredible time and then say, listen, I just had this organic connection with this spaceship. It was over 1.5 kilometers long. It's massive, and it was telepathic. I said, yeah, it's organic metals. It's showing you, you've got to see the metaphor there. And also other people have dreams where they're like, I was on the coast and it was flooding, huge flooding. That's actually quite metaphorically connected to their own emotions, massive amounts of emotions. So even when I'm awake in the dream, I still got to look for the metaphor. And as you understand more about the astral plane, time and space is reversed there. What is the three-dimensional realms that are here are inverted. They become more like time. Space becomes like time, and time becomes like space. And this is the real key of the fourth dimensional travel that we're aiming for. We'll become timeless, or the immortal selves, when we really touch into spirit. But understanding the soul, how it moves in the astral planes is key to working with the veils and working with beings in reality, as it were, rather than just your own imagination. Now, I use that word imagination because you really need your own imagination, because as you feel, a lot of people end up doubting themselves. And the imagination is actually the key to the I magi state, the I magi, or the magician state, or the magnetist. So you're attracting your reality at a phenomenal rate. You're actually attracting it at a light speed. And therefore, if you look at the dream as the metaphor, it's your soul laying out the day, what's going on. If you're being, attacked by some huge ogre or being, that is metaphorically about someone challenging you in this world, or deep, emotional aspects such as hatred or jealousy being directed towards you. You start to see it. So the movies become real. In fact, most movies don't even register anymore unless they've got a real good meaning to them, because your life becomes so interesting in the astral and in the dream. Once again, waking up is when we tend to lose most, because we come back into our mental mind. Okay, remember, soul is different. We come through what's called, the misty state, or the twilight zone. Obviously, many of you probably understood that. And just remembering to retrieve most of that dream. Yet you may have nights without dreams. Yet when you lie a certain way, if you're in directional aspect, try this as well, because it makes up to your own organic self. If your head is to the north, or if it's more to the northeast or to the east and things like this, have a look at your own self and where you get the most dreams from. Some sleeping positions are more for deeper rest. Other times you might get in the dream realm and be there for days. And you can walk around virtually in the astral plane, but you can come back into this world quite tired. You didn't get the rest that you required in the dream, because you're actually working in a parallel dimension and universe. Not obviously the topic of your average dream analyst, but that's what I have to share with that particular question.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and there's a lot that can be taken from the dream experience, and I think especially if you're into studying symbolism, it's like the dreams don't really speak in literal words; they tend to speak in symbols. And so, if you're a student of the tarot, for example,
yes,
that can help to act as a language bridge. Focusing on a tarot, on a minor arcana or something before you go to bed. If you do that a couple of days in a row, chances are you're going to have a dream you're giving it a language set or a symbol set to pull from. And so you can have essentially a dream using those things around that information. And then obviously having some study time with the tarot deck or that card can help to inform it as well. And, but yeah, just in symbolism alone, it's very good because, everyone that tells you they had a dream about you, and it's like, well, it probably wasn't actually me. It was something about you coming through me as the character. There's something about me. There's a relevance, but it's not necessarily me. I don't need to dress up in a tutu and carry a pink umbrella and stand on a bucket in the middle of the street, sort of thing. I haven't actually got that. I just, for the record, that's not on my bucket list. Okay,
that was very specific, though.
It was oddly specific.
Maybe not this week. But...
it depends what they start putting in the water, right? Anyway, okay, Manuela, I would love to hear your take on dreams, sister. Please.
Yeah, as you said already, there's like a whole science, so to say, behind the dreams and the dream world, and obviously many layers and ways to connect with the dreams. And I worked quite a lot on this during my early stages of the shamanic practice, and then I decided, okay, to not practice this part anymore because I really like my sleep. I like to wake up in the morning being refreshed and not working at night, so to say. But what I find with dreams in general, and that's just from observing and talking to customers, because I used to do a lot of house clearings, and especially when you go into children's bedrooms, there's always portals open, and the parents tell you, the kids are seeing the boogeyman and all of that stuff. They can't sleep, and of course the boogeyman is not real. So yeah, I find it depends how clear your connection to the astral and your dream world is. So, for example, with children, they are new in this world, but they're still very connected to, the unseen realm, so to say. But then they get bombarded with this reality, and plus, they have TV and social media. So it's very hard for them to distinguish, what is actually real. And then at night, they mix all of that together and open portals and, things happen. And I find that a similar thing happens with adults when they haven't sorted out their emotions, or, they're still at the beginning stage of, learning energy work, so to say, but there's still a lot of emotional stuff going around. They don't know how to clear energetically their space or protect themselves and stuff like this. Then they're mixing the mental with the astral, and then dreams can be not really so reliable in terms if you want information or clear connection to something or someone. So yeah, it's a big topic and probably a bit too big to get into it because there's just so many facets to it. And yeah, I might just leave it with that.
Okay, that's great. And it's great that you mentioned about getting a good night's sleep too, because, if you get in, like I found that it became slightly tyrannical. I could write 3 or 4 pages a day easy. That's that's the objective, what I saw. So you get good at picking up the fragments first thing in the morning, and then you sit down with your dream journal and your little scrap of paper from next to your bed or your little dictaphone, and you're writing them down. And then, that little fragment, ping, opens up. And it's actually, I made a video on this on the channel about, using dream recall to train visualization, because you've already had an experience and all you're doing is recalling something that happened, rather than, say, trying to visualize something new that you haven't experienced before, you haven't got in your memory, in your field, whatever. But the dream is, and so by sort of cracking open through exploring dream fragments. But like I said, waking up exhausted like you've run a marathon gets a bit old. And and especially because a lot of the dreams, like you said, they can be just a lot of housekeeping from your psyche in a lot of cases too, that maybe don't really, they can give you the same thing from a bunch of different angles. But yeah, recognize, like you said, this is such a big topic. I guess what I'm going for here, and I'll pass this over to Nathan, and I'll just preface it with this and say, like, finding out where it's useful in practice, or whether it's just a nice thing where every so often you have a super vivid one that's maybe highly meaningful. Some of them are like really meaningful because they're like a very impactful experience. But on the flip side, it's like another rabbit hole as well that can just go on and maybe not necessarily lead anywhere that is super functional, but doesn't mean there's still not some value in there. So Nathan, I would love to hear your take on, whether you have found dreams or dream practices to be valuable in any way.
I find typically active practices have almost always been not very fruitful for me. But within the scope of the greater practice, all of the stuff starts to happen. And that's usually how I find my way into these things, is not through attempting to do dream work, but usually in conjunction with your previous question about retreats. That was always how it would start, in terms of beginning to blur the distinctions between waking and sleeping, and what we might think of as being wakeful and then falling asleep into greater wakefulness, or waking up into greater sleepfulness. There's a whole bunch of weird paradoxes that start to occur. And this is not only subject to the dream state. I think like a lot of dream work you can look at as a really wonderful tool, but also not exclusive to being asleep in any way. And it's something that you start to be able to do in normal, like, meditation type practices, and then from that in normal living, as the skill keeps growing and as the tyrannical nature of the logical mind starts to give its scepter over to your spirit more and more and more. So you can have all of these like astral explorations, and you're burning off parts of you. A lot of people, when they sleep, there's physiological reasons for all this stuff, but I think often the physiological stuff is secondary and happens as a byproduct of some of the spiritual stuff working itself out. And so, as anyone who's done any Qigong would know, when you start moving astral energy around, especially if it's like in your body, you start to get hot, usually in the beginning. And so very often as we're falling asleep and during sleep, we start venting out a lot of these astral stagnancies. And that often just leaves as heat at night. And so you have this funny experience when most people start meditating, where the first few hours or whatever of, if you're going to practice all day, you're venting, you're cleansing essentially. And so one way of looking at dreams is a manner of cleansing and purification of astral stuff that's been going on. I found that the symbology of it appears much less for me, and I tend to have very similar, for the most part, types of experiences I do when like waking, when being awake and in practice, where it's everything is happening without the intermediary of the symbol, right? So the symbology is a means of like the idea, like a prime idea that's somehow trying to find its way into expression. But underneath the expression of the symbol is the thing that gives rise to the symbol. And so you can start to like talk, I say talk, but like communicate isn't really the right word either. But you start to experience with, as in, of that thing prior to the symbology. And so then you can take the symbology and use it as a tool backwards, right? Like, you know, back down the rabbit hole, into all the stuff. I found there's been some very interesting connections where, like, probably the easiest way to get started with dream work, if you're of a mentality like me, is when you wake up in the morning, there's a period of time, I think, Michael, you called it like the mists or something, when you were talking, where the logical mind jumps in, the identity mind jumps in, and you go, oh yeah, that's why I'm excited. That's why I'm depressed. Oh yeah, my knee's supposed to hurt. Oh yeah, like I'm supposed to feel heartbroken. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be exhilarated. Oh, I forgot all that. Thank God I remembered that I'm supposed to be like whatever. And so there's this space prior to that before you pick up your identity. And if you can hang out in that space, there's a tremendous amount of work you can do there that is so much easier to do because you don't have the imprisoned nature of the identity of that logical mind, essentially entrapping the astral habits and whatnot into their habitual locations. And so you're in that timeless space starts to open up. And so you can start from an astral standpoint. It's free to move. So it's sometimes I use a metaphor of the identity being like a foot that's stepping on a bunch of dry leaves and the winds are blowing. If you take that identity foot off, the leaves can blow. They can move. And so in that space that before you pick up your identity, you can do a tremendous amount of liberative work, light work, healing work, whatever it is that you want to do, whether it be self-hypnotic or anything else, because your defenses are down. The part of you that needs to be separate is taken a hiatus. And so often in prayer, people touch into a similar space. And so you can use this type of before you pick up your identity thing in the mornings, for example, as a doorway to then start working back further and deeper and further and deeper. And anyone who's done a lot of meditation will, of course, go, oh yeah, I kind of know that space where you let go of yourself, and everything starts to be malleable and movable, and your reality becomes quite liquid or quite like gaseous and in different ways. Like the reality shifts and the substance of that reality can change, at least from an experiential standpoint. So in terms of entering, I think that's like the easiest way if you're don't have the greatest success with trying to do exercises specifically and having them bear fruit. And once you get into this, you can spend, a lot of time in that, pre-waking up stage, just really, really drawing that out, pulling those moments apart. And then, of course, because you've spent that time in that place, you can return to it from a more wakeful state and see if you can re-enter that throughout the day, if that's what you want to work on. I guess that topic is done.